Good afternoon, good evening to all of you. You've tuned into Kirill Gerstein Invites, an online forum hosted by Kronberg Academy. And I'm delighted that we continue reconvening in this virtual space that allows us to come together in ways that physical constraints wouldn't. And it's a joy and an honor to welcome Joshua Redman, a legendary musician, to our forum today for what we've both, I think, agreed to title as a rather improvised chat, as the medium that Joshua works in is so fitting to that, jazz. But Joshua is somebody that has, I think, been both carrying the tradition of jazz and pushing at its boundaries as any tradition deserves to be pushed, and redefining it. So we'll talk all about that and many other things. As always, and I underline it, it's great that you join us for the live session, and your comments and your questions are a vital part of this being a live and interactive event. So please type your questions, put them in the Q&A, your comments, and I will pass them on to Joshua, and we'll weave that into our discussion. But Joshua, thanks for joining. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Wherever here is, and and perhaps as one place to start, when I emailed you, as I always do with my guests, asking what would you like to play or show for the opening sequence, and you chose this very striking, very powerful, and historically important recording of Coltrane Quartet. So tell me more about it from your perspective. Why
Sure.
that recording?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you emailed me yesterday and I had to think quickly, and it's never a bad choice for me, for anyone to play Coltrane. I mean, he's there's no greater musician in jazz, and he's been such a foundational figure for all of us. And I think one of the reasons why I chose to play Coltrane is I think that my first awareness of music was through listening to Coltrane's records. I mean, before I was even conscious of what a record was. I mean, in fact, one of the first, I mean, yeah, like one of the first times I ever, one of my early childhood memories is, my mom playing Coltrane's music, and in particular the record Love Supreme, and then seeing the album cover and being transfixed by both the image, this image of Coltrane on the album cover, so focused and with so much intensity, but also you could sense that compassion and vulnerability in his expression, and then just the majesty and the searing intensity of his sound, and that group sound. So yeah, I mean, I think I've been aware of Coltrane as long as I've been aware of music, so it seems like a good place to start. And also, this piece in particular, Alabama, is one of the great statements in jazz. I think one of the great social justice statements in jazz music.
This came after, as in partially as a response to the 16th Street bombing, right?
Yes. I think it was directly a response. The 16th Street, the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church. I guess that was, I think it was in Birmingham, Alabama,
Yeah.
in September of 1963. I think it was a white supremacist bombing of a Black American church, and four young, four teenage girls were killed in that bombing, and it was kind of a it was a very, very important moment in the civil rights movement, and it kind of it shocked and transfixed the nation. And Dr. Martin Luther King gave a speech. I think he gave the eulogy, and Coltrane, the eulogy for the four girls who were killed, and Coltrane modeled, I believe the story is that Coltrane modeled the melody of Alabama off of the text of Dr. King's speech. But I think for me, you know, as a jazz musician, there are jazz musicians who I think are very, very who are very, very comfortable with creating music that is about something, you know, music that is direct, that is a direct kind of almost a literal response to things that are going on in the world, you know. And that's something that I've, although I like to think of myself as someone who's, you know, deeply situated in the world and aware of the world, and you know, I have very, very strong ethical and political beliefs. I've never felt particularly comfortable making music that's explicitly about something. and you know, in a certain way, I feel like that's, well, I don't want to say it's a failing, but I've always wished that I could be a little bit more relevant, you know, explicitly.
Yeah, well, this is, I mean, there's so much already you strike that's so, I think, on our thoughts and on the tips of our tongues, so to say. But on the other hand, you are in great company with people like Stravinsky. You said, you know, art and particularly music is not about anything else except itself. So this is, of course, this sort of eternal dilemma.
I certainly don't believe. All due respect to Igor, but I certainly do not believe that art is about only itself. You know, I believe it's about so much more. But it's this feeling as an artist of, you know, your or my comfort level kind of like explicitly engaging in a certain sort of statement making or message making. You know, I think that, you know, some of my idols, some of my heroes have excelled at that. I mean, I picked this piece because I think it stands in jazz as one of the most successful of such statements, because it was so explicitly political, yet the artistic value and the depth and it's so authentic and genuine and so personal. And so for me, it's kind of like a reminder that it can be done, even though I'm not sure I will ever be able to do it. Yeah.
Well, you're very modest, but it's also, I find it actually very appealing and sympathetic about your musicianship, that you make statements, musical statements, but I think sometimes one risks when it so becomes too overtly activist music, then so one wades into some other territory that's not entirely successful. Also, neither for statement making nor for not for music. But of course, I think with the grave situation in the world now, and there are actually so many grave situations in addition to the war in Ukraine. But of course, I think all of us musicians feel this so well. You know how vital and important, and what can be done with and through our art. And I'm sure with your ethical and moral beliefs, you grapple with that also. I mean, because
I mean, it's you know, and this is another reason why I chose it, because because of everything that's gone on, you know, everything that's going on right now, literally right now in our world, and you know, everything that's gone on in our world for forever, but you know, in our country, you know, over the past, you know, 1, 2, 5, 8, 9 years. Yeah, I mean, it's there's been a lot of there's been a lot of there's been a lot of questioning and self-questioning, I think, for myself, like this kind of like, what WTF am I doing? You know, like I, you know, because there is something that can feel, I mean, I think there's a danger, maybe with all music, and maybe in particular with a lot of the more art musics, and maybe in particular with jazz, this danger of feeling like it's kind of not self-referential, but this feeling of self-indulgence, like, oh, okay, I'm just getting up here and just playing what I feel at the moment that I feel it, and trying to take a good solo, and you know, and what value am I bringing to the world? I mean, I do believe there's value in this music. Don't get me wrong, but I want to feel like I want to feel like it's a selfless act as well as a selfish act.
yeah, no, I know what you mean, and I think with our double guilt as myself counting more as a sort of classical player, there's this double guilt of it's not even so your music, one's music, it's though somebody else's music being recreated, and so again, what value? But I wonder what you think. I mean, more and more, I find that you know, the value of art, the value of music. Yes, I don't think I don't think it lacks value, but its value is not directed in a concentrated way with a kind of reducible goal that you can say, well, you know, it's good or it's valuable because, you know, makes your kids smart if you listen to Mozart, or you know, makes you a better person if you listen to Beethoven or Coltrane. Maybe for some people it will, maybe for some it won't, and I think that goes the same for students that pursue music, or when it's directed out into the world for an audience. It certainly has impact and certainly does something, but perhaps it's even a mistake to expect to reduce it and to enter the kind of the economic conversation with politicians of, well, you know, we should keep music education because it does that, it does something. That's what I've been feeling more and more lately. I don't know how what your response to that is.
Yeah, I mean, um I mean, it feels damn good, you know. You know, there's the self-indulgent part, but there's also, yes, I mean, it's, I mean, there's a hedonistic aspect to it for me. You know, it does, it makes me feel, you know, as good as I can feel in almost any capacity, in almost any undertaking, you know. But what is that good feeling? For me, I think that good feeling is, well, yes, I'm an improvising musician, so I'm able on a good day or on a good night, I'm able to tap into whatever it is that I'm thinking and feeling in that moment, and um, in that moment create something out of that through my horn, through the notes. So I think what I was saying is that there's a sense of kind of like, well, what feels good about it? What feels good about it is this kind of like self-actualizing um, uh, uh, experience, this self-actualizing process as an individual, playing what I feel in the moment that I feel it, telling my story, you know. But there's also, and I think this is actually the greater, for me, the greater and deeper and more profound experience is this sense of doing that as part of a collective, and doing that as part of the community of musicians that I'm playing with, having that musical conversation in the moment with those musicians, and um, doing that in a way that connects with those other musicians, and serves the larger musical whole, the larger narrative, which isn't just my narrative, it's not just my story, but it's the group story. And on top of that, it's also, it's the narrative of everyone there. It's tapping into that feeling, that collective experience of everyone there in the room, not just the musicians on the stage, but the audience as well, all the listeners. And that feeling, I mean, it is, that is also a kind of that is a pleasure. You know, there's a hedonism in that. There's a, that losing yourself to the group, and relinquishing yourself to the flow of the collective flow. But there's that, I think, has I mean, there is an ethical component there, you know, because there is a that binding yourself to the collective, and that surrendering yourself to the collective at the same time as you are asserting your individuality, and you're asserting your identity, and asserting your selfhood. That kind of balance, it's almost a paradox. You know, you're at once the most fully yourself, and also the least yourself. You know, you found and lost yourself at the same time. That, I think, that experience is not just, oh, this feels good. You know, that's an experience that has, I think, a value, and maybe that's something that is maybe that's something that makes the world a better place. You know, maybe that's a teachable value, and that's a value that those who are there that can experience that, and I'm not just saying the musicians that are playing, but everyone there that's a part of the music making, which is literally everyone that is there. You walk away with that, you with it. Maybe it makes you a more sensitive person, a more compassionate person, and a more moral person. So yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I mean, we can't, I'm definitely not the one who can make, you know, you know, the data-driven argument for like how, you know, teaching music in schools is going to make you, like you were saying, you know, going to make your kids smarter or something like, you know, but that, you know, there is definitely a part of me that believes that, you know, if more of us did this and experienced this, we would have less of this madness that's going on, in this barbarism that's going on in the world today.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with you. I find it in a similar vein that there's something that is very much a mirror of ourselves as we make music, and there's something that mirrors, reflects the human experience at large, as you said, of being yourself and at the same time being part of the collective. And this is I think something that quite defines our human experience. In that sense, I think this coming together of communal appreciation of a substance, be it by playing the musical substance or listening to it, but this communal coming together is, I think, a crucial thing to our human existence. And that's been particularly different in these last pandemic years, no? We've I think it's great for education purposes that you and I and everyone in the virtual room today can come together. But as far as this communal appreciation of let's say, a piece of music, the streams in the pandemic have shown the very limits of it that one arrives at very quickly, no?
Yes, yeah, it's severely limiting. Yeah, I mean, limiting to the point of, for some of us, borderline insanity inducing. I mean, this is, look, I mean, I've been, I mean, I'm blessed. I mean, I'm so fortunate. We are so fortunate. We have a roof over our heads. We have running water. We have food to eat. I can, spend a couple hours a day in here trying to find the right reed still. I've practiced more than I've never been a big practicer. It's funny when you signed on with the when I signed on before the session started, it had a big banner on top of Zoom that said practice session. I'm like, practice. I practice enough these days. But this, yeah, I mean, I'm one of the extremely lucky ones, not only in the world, but just even as a jazz musician, being able to ride out the pandemic in the way that we have. But it's been a it's been a bumpy ride, and in most cases, for me, over the last couple of years, this kind of gradual turning into precipitous descent. And it's not, of course, like, okay, I'm not making music, I'm not working, that sucks. I love making music. This is my job. I want to do my job. But what I think I realized, and what hit me so hard, especially towards the end of 21 of last year, is that the loss of in-person music making, that loss has been, for me, not the greatest loss has not actually been the creative loss or the artistic loss, which have been huge, but the social loss, like, it just not having. I mean, the reality is that music is my social life. I mean, I'm an antisocial MF, right? Like, I mean, I can I can I can quarantine like a boss. I've got no problem with, like, not going out. Like, I don't, I can staying at home was not the issue. But not, like, I realized that music is the way in which I connect with others in the most honest, authentic, uninhibited, unneurotic way possible. It's my escape from all this internal, isolated stuff that goes on. So that has been a profound loss. I mean, for all of us, and I mean, it's great to be with you here in this virtual space, and select opportunities like these have been salvations of sorts. but I mean, I live in Berkeley, California. We're in the San Francisco Bay Area, which has probably been one of the most shut down um, uh, places in the country overall. But live music has started to return, and recently I've had a chance to go out and hear some great music in San Francisco. And just the other day, I went and heard a, a, a fantastic pianist, a dear friend of mine, Aaron Parks, at SF Jazz, and he was just playing solo piano, and um, yeah, there was this feeling of like before he even played the first note, and you could kind of we could see and feel and hear him trying to figure out what that first note would be, what tonality he would start with. He ended up starting in D flat, but like, just that process of kind of like trying to feel what was there, what could be accessed, in the room, the vibrations, the feeling, that the atmosphere, and then that decision of, okay, this is where I begin. This is where we begin. Yeah. Like that was, it was just like before that moment, before the note was even played, I realized there's no substitute for this yet. I mean, someone will break the algorithm.
Yeah, no, there is no substitute for that. And this, like you said, the sense of expectation. It's finally even not the note, but the expectation of the note. And I think this is what strings a great performance. By the way, good friend Amy Paré from Berlin, she comments that from the audience perspective, on a quote-unquote good day, listening to a performance, whether improvised or not, helps remind one is alive. It is profoundly individual while experienced in the collective. And I think that's true for us as players also. I mean, I also feel, I also survived the pandemic and feel blessed in many ways, and I was neither bored nor unemployed, but this feeling of being alive when you are about to play, or when you're on stage with colleagues or with an orchestra and playing something. This is, so, as you say, it's irreplaceable. In response to your comment that there's this hedonistic pleasure, came to my mind the quote that one of my favorites, Mr. Ferruccio Busoni, quotes in one of his letters, a medieval treatise on music, an English one, and the quote is that music is a science, but its goal is pleasure, which I've always enjoyed, because it also underlines that there is a lot of craft and there's a lot of science to the music making. And this is perhaps what I want to ask you about next, though there's so many things I want to ask you about, and some questions are also coming in to that end, sort of the science or the craft of playing jazz, because I think there's so even more mystique than with classical music. With classical music, those people think, not entirely accurately, well, you've got the things printed on the page, you learn to play them, there's your, classical music performance. We know that's not quite that simple, but okay. With jazz, I think there is even more this sense of, my God, you come out, and as you just said, the Aaron starting on D flat, as you come out, and this thing comes out of thin air. Yet, also having studied jazz and tried playing jazz, so it's clear to me it's not quite like that. But it would be very interesting to hear you talk about how you think, how you model the process of learning the language of jazz. Let's say for a hypothetical somebody that starts and becomes advanced, and then also I would love to hear about where you are now and how you explore it on a daily basis, and how you practice and what you practice. But how does one learn the language of jazz? I think we could say it has some similarities to being a language.
Sure. Well, let me say first that my my model is definitely not the model I would hold up as a as I would hold up as a model. I should say my path through the music, my experience is not, should not be a model, because for the first, geez, well, probably until I moved to New York and actually started playing seriously. So for the first 22 years of my life, I didn't even really consider myself a musician, or I was not a musician first. I was a listener first. I loved listening to music. Um, I always had, and still have, a very kind of disciplined and methodical and over analytical, you know, uh, intellectual kind of self-questioning, critical stance, in towards myself and towards the world. I mean, I've always had those kind of tendencies.
I commiserate.
Yeah. For me, music, for until I actually chose to become a professional musician, music was my escape from all of that. So like, I mean, I was a painfully shy kid, painfully anxious kid. I wasn't a particularly happy kid. I was, but I had the ability to focus on schoolwork or whatever, or just maybe it was out of pure fear, so I had this kind of like rigorous thing that I had, or just, I knew how to, I was really good at my delayed gratification skills were off the charts, right? So I was good at like, applying myself, I wasn't good at things, but I was good at applying myself till I could get better at them, but not with music. Music was always kind of what I did to just escape that part of my being. So for music was play, completely play for me. No seriousness, no discipline, no no real dedication to it. It was what I did to feel alive, as I think Amy
Yeah.
had put it. And so, that is definitely not a model that I would, that's not how you learn to play this music or any music,
Or indeed it is, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I know what you.
But you mentioned, I hope I'm going to answer one of your questions at some point. You mentioned that this kind of like, this perception, that some folks have, maybe some folks who have had more of the kind of classical, what I might call like a textual training with music, like the way you earn, you learn music by, well, here's the note on the page and this is how I play that note. If that's kind of your basis in music, then there's something kind of mystical about jazz improvisation. It's like, well, we're creating it out of thin air. Well, of course it's not true. We aren't creating it out of thin air, right? There is a deep, it is a deep and highly sophisticated and highly specific and just hard ass language, right? It's a vocabulary that we have to learn. But this idea that somehow like improvisation is mystical on some level, I I mean, there are mystical elements to that. What I was referring to before is that this kind of collective improvisational experience, but that's, I think, a collective music making experience, whether it's improvisational or not. For me, as someone who wasn't trained, like my first experiences with music were literally just like going to instruments and, well, I'd like to say playing something on them, but basically probably just banging on them until some sort of frequencies like reverberated or blowing through them. For me, improvisation is not the mystical thing. The mystical thing is like, what are these notes on the page and how do I make sense of them? And how do I make it through, like 4 bars without like missing one, right? Like that's foreign. That's not natural to me. We live our lives as human beings. We are natural improvisers, right? I mean, what you and I are doing, we're having a conversation. We're certainly not following a script. Maybe I should have prepared one, but that's actually true. But in our everyday interactions with the world, with our acquaintances, with our friends, with our family, we aren't following any type of script. We don't wake up in the morning and like, okay, act 1 is, this is how I'm gonna, pour my Cheerios into the bowl, and this is what I'm gonna say to my sister when she, tries to, take the shower before me or whatever. Like, we're not following any sort of script. We're, we may have our routines, but we're making it up as we go along. I mean, okay, I guess it's, some might, maybe it's, are we following some script that was written by someone somewhere, or that's more of a theological question, right? or a cosmological question, for the physicists or something. But if we're following a script, it's certainly not one that we're really aware of. So
the script is complicated enough for us to feel that there isn't particular.
Improvisation is, in a sense, to me, the least mystical aspect of our being as human. Like, it's just what we do every day, and especially it's what we do when we are having conversations with one another.
Even though I must say, of course, I agree with you, and the parallel is apt, but I've been for quite some time fascinated with how difficult and seemingly unnatural this thing of, let's say, operating an instrument is. That, yes, we're having a conversation, it's rather easy, though obviously in some way we've practiced it a lot in our lives, but it's not a complicated thing for us by now, but seems for even incredibly talented people, take it Rachmaninoff or Oscar Peterson or anybody, even they practiced these instruments and speaking through them so much, and even then, not every night with a great person, a great result comes out, which I find is incredibly fascinating, that even great people and great musicians regularly struggle. So it seems to be a very, very difficult thing. I mean, I'm not saying it's as useful as brain surgery being difficult, but it's terribly difficult.
No, it's terribly difficult, and for me, it's difficult, and to the point of sometimes utter frustration, and a feeling of, I mean, the thing that I think I've battled with more than anything else in my life as a professional jazz musician is just like trying to fend off that that impulse, that desire I have to after the fact to say I'm not going to do this again because I suck. I mean, like the act itself is always. It always feels great. It always feels right. It always feels true, no matter how badly I might be playing. But the aftermath is brutal, because then the other part of my, psyche, my brain, my processing kicks in, and it's like, you didn't do this, and you didn't do this, and this could have been this, and this could have been this, and
But
you know,
this you
it's the
do after the performance, or do you find that your mind tries to do that while you play, or you found a
well,
way to
okay.
suspend it?
So my mind is always trying to find a way to do this. Okay, it's just part of my mind, probably part of a lot of our minds. I think the 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 thing about jazz, the thing about music, and maybe jazz in particular, is that, in fact, I would say jazz in particular for me, um, is that that's the one of the few places where that part of my mind doesn't reign supreme, where it can be kept, down, where it belongs. It's trying to poke through there, but there's something about that, the the demands of improvisation, the ethic of improvisation, the feeling of improvisation that prevents that editor, that hyper self-critical editor from, they're there, piping up, but it's kind of like, it's this little needling voice maybe in the background that I can kind of generally shut out, or just kind of like, ride, keep on riding with it, yapping away, whereas when the music stops, then it's like, then the bullhorn comes out.
And do you do
and,
you
and, 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 and the one thing I'll say is that, and this is probably why I could never, I've never been able to play, textual based. Well, I don't know why I say that. Well, I've never been able to play, been a good reader of music, or been able to play music that exists primarily on the page first, is because that, well, one, I'm just not good at it, like that. I don't have that hand-eye or whatever, that I didn't develop that processing power, and didn't have it naturally. But also, that's a situation where that voice just comes right up there, because it's like, oh, you missed that note, you missed that note, you missed that note. But like with jazz, it's like, okay, I'm improvising, and okay, I played a note that I miss notes all the time. The missing of the note is probably this gap between this, between my what I perceive as my intention, like this sense that this is what I'm hearing, this is what I think I'm about to play, or what I think I'm hearing, and then I play it and it's not that. So there is that gap between like expectation, intention on the one hand, and execution on the other. But somehow that's not as it's not as it's not the same sort of crime. It's not as grave a failure. And in fact, it's oftentimes, I think, in improvisation, it's sometimes the greatest success, because it's like, that's a mistake. Like, I thought I was going to play something and I didn't play it. I thought I was hearing something and I didn't play what I heard. But that can be sometimes have more value. And also what can have value is making that work. Like, okay, that was wrong. Well, what made it wrong? What made it wrong was it wasn't what I intended to play. But what does that mean? Like, what my intention, like what is that? Maybe that was what the music was, the collective music was asking of me. Or maybe it's just like, okay, that was wrong, but like, how do I get out of it? Now it's this, like, that's done, now how do I navigate a path that out of that validates that mistake and makes it makes it somehow a success, makes it a basis for further exploration.
And just in your own estimation, when you are playing a solo that you find is so, this is going particularly well, in the most successful moments, are you hyper aware, meaning that you are so in the flow of reacting to the harmonic changes and the possibilities, and it's all so hyper detailed in your mind? Or do you find that that you enter certain states that other people describe where you sort of just don't know what's happening and it's just so something is playing through you? Are you more sort of the hyper aware, or the best feeling for you is when you're sort of not aware at all intellectually? Or
Yeah, I mean, I'd say to try to for once answer one of your questions with some simplicity and brevity, I would say the latter. That's the short answer. I would say that I am more. It's more this sense of being caught up and in a larger flow state, being in that flow state, being more of a conduit, being more in service, and less, I mean, yeah, I would say not hyper aware. But by the same token, I would say that at any moment, like when I'm in that flow state, I could, in a way, I have more clarity. I have more intellectual clarity of what's happening than I might normally have. Because I didn't study. I mean, I can read music. I'm not a good reader. I can read music. I know theory. If someone puts some chord changes in front of me, I know kind of how to navigate them. So I have that. It's not like it's not like I don't have that kind of, some foundational intellectual knowledge of this music that I'm playing. When I'm in that state, when things are going well, like that consciousness, that intellectual consciousness of what is actually happening analytically in the music, it is never the driving force. I think that's the difference. It doesn't feel as if that's what is that's not calling the shots. That's not navigating the ship. It's something else. However, I think in that state, I might actually have more clarity of those and more command of those elements than I normally would. So I'm never like, okay, if I'm improvising over a set, over a tune that has, a set of changes and, a harmonic sequence, and I'm playing a certain melodic phrase over that harmonic sequence, like it's, if it's going well, it's never because, for me, it's never because I'm now going to make this conscious choice to play this particular harmonic substitution, or to use these particular like approach notes, these, to kind of, craft this melodic line. It's never that kind of like, okay, theory here, plug it in and do this. Like, it's never this kind of like, here's my material, here's my, conscious material, and now I'm gonna like insert it here and make a statement. But in a way, I feel like my analytical skills, like I can be in that flow state, but actually maybe know what I'm doing, even on an intellectual level, more. Like it's kind of, so there is, so it's simultaneously this like deep emotional and kind of spiritual relinquishment, but also that creates the potential uh, for for a certain kind of like heightened awareness that I might not normally have. Like it's almost like that ups my brain power, like my conscious analytical brain power at that moment.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so this is, well, a bit more about performance, but so you talked before about practice and practice session, and I know somewhere even in the outside the camera frame, your horn is resting, but. How, what does practice consist for you? I mean, I'm not leaving out now the sort of the, you know, the keeping the fingers and the lips and the tongue and, so, and the breathing so just fit, but what are your, what would be some of your practice goals on a day? Obviously, you're you know, it's an understatement to say you're an advanced jazz player, but so you're in command of the art. But you wake up in the morning, you're like, well, I'm going to practice. And what are some of the goals like?
Right, sure. Okay, so maybe we'll start with like kind of the pre-pandemic goals, like I think for the last decade or so, before what the last decade or so before the pandemic, when I was on the road a lot and basically bouncing from gig to gig, and not just gig to gig, but band to band, different musical situation to different musical situation. A lot of times it was just just trying to be prepared for whatever the music that I was going to be playing for with the next project. So a lot of it was just purely functional, like, okay, I'm gonna go out on the road and playing this music with this band, and I don't know the music, so send me the music and then let me learn the music. For me, a lot of times learning the music is like, well, there might be a certain part I have to play. I need to learn the melody and the chord changes, but then it's kind of like getting used to like improvising through these different structures, and I would say as time goes on, as the inevitable march, I don't even want to say forward with the development of the language, because I don't think it's all purely necessarily this. I don't think you can necessarily tell the story of jazz music, the evolution of jazz music now as this purely modern story. I think there was a time when you could kind of clearly make a case for how one period in jazz led to the next and the next. This was how each period kind of like took what happened before and expanded on that, and it was like kind of the logical next step. This is the next thing. That's like the modern story, right? This kind of linear development. But I mean, maybe that ended in jazz and somewhere in the late 60s, early 70s.
It seemingly ended in a lot of art forms now. It's
Yeah.
not only music, but in other art forms, that there's sort of this nice linear development has shattered itself, or we just can't see the line because we're we are
Because
on.
we're in it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it is I mean, for lack of a better word, it's postmodern. But and there is more pastiche or whatnot. I mean, I'm still a romantic at heart, I think, even though, yeah, I'm about 202 years too late or whatever, but no, or 150, I don't know. But anyway, like, my point is that, the kinds of tunes that jazz musicians are writing are getting kind of progressively more just, well, the pejorative word would be fussy, but just like, you're like, people are writing stuff with, stranger harmonies, and especially rhythmically, like, learning to improvise over, more complex rhythmic forms and shifting meters. And, I mean, I remember when I got to New York, people were just starting to, like, really mess around with playing in like odd meters that were based on the quarter note. So like instead of 4/4 and a waltz 3/4, people were starting to, let's play like let's play like Someone in Love, a standard, in 5/4 or 7/4. So that was kind of like what was happening. This was in 91. Now it's like 11/8, 13/8, 13/16, and then a bar of 7/8, and then a bar of 1/1, and so like, and you'll actually see tunes like this. And just the kids now, they're like, well, whatever. For me, it's just like, so like part of it is just like, if just practicing doing that, right, and getting comfortable with that, and see, so for me, and maybe this goes to the kind of like the intellectual versus emotional, the mind body thing, that dualism. For me, in order for something to feel comfortable, in order for me to really feel comfortable as an improviser, playing over certain structures and within certain structures, they have to, they cannot just live up here. They can't just live in the mind. They have to enter the body. So for me to feel, because ultimately in jazz, I think the fundamental in which we are level on which we are relating is a rhythmic level. Like that's our, I don't like it's so, it's so easy to speak in hierarchies, like what's the most important thing in jazz, who are your top 10 players, so like I'm kind of undermining in advance the statement that I'm going to make. And the statement I'm going to make is that, like, the most foundational aspect of jazz, the fundamental level on which we relate, kind of our substructure, is groove, it's rhythm. Now melody and harmony contain all of that, yes, but it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. And swing can be anything. It doesn't have to be like ching 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 ching. It can be a funk groove, or it can be a straight eighth groove, or it can be a Latin groove, a bossa groove. But fundamentally, the way in which we relate, I think, jazz musicians relate, is we relate through the rhythm and the collective, the connection through the rhythm and the groove that we generate together rhythmically. And then that's kind of our, that's our mud sill, that's our foundation, and everything else is built on top of that. So that's, for me to feel comfortable, as an improviser, I kind of have to feel locked in rhythmically. And for me to feel locked in rhythmically, I have to feel it in the body,
So this fascinates me a lot. Also, this groove, this feeling of time. Can one say anything about it except that it's really kind of a physiological feeling of comfort or discomfort that timing generates, or is there something one can say about it? I spent a lot of time in my studies.
There's something I can say about it. I'm just not sure if I'm going to believe anything that I say. I think that, this may be just another way of saying the same thing, but I think that that it has to feel like dance. It has to feel like dance. Now, this is kind of it's kind of ironic because, especially a lot of jazz music, pretty much, yeah, the vast majority of jazz music that's played today, modern jazz music, isn't what I would call danceable. I don't dance to it, you know.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. I mean, also nothing from Bach partitas to anything else in classical music. Also, it's not quite danceable, but
Right.
I know what you mean. It has to feel dance-like for the body to feel
Yes.
edible.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it is.
Yeah. 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 I mean, my, and that may be that, that may be a slight, uh, yeah, I mean, maybe I'm particularly, um, I highlight that particularly in my own, it's particularly a part of my own comfort zone, or maybe I'm my own bias or prejudice in a way, because my mom was a dancer, and so kind of, she, I mean, I kind of, I guess I kind of was exposed to music and dance simultaneously, and a lot of times, some of my earliest experiences kind of, um, appreciating music were appreciating music in the context of dance, and vice versa. I'm not a dancer, but I think that's all to say that, that's all to say that pre-pandemic, now I guess I'm finally getting back to the question that you asked. A lot of it is kind of like, getting comfortable with certain forms, whatever it is that I'm trying to work on, so that they start to enter not just the kind of, yeah, so that they're processed in the kind of intellectually removed space, but they start to enter that more physical, embodied, guttural, space. That's when I'm able to kind of like start to feel free. Now, and then, if I'm working on something, like working on a certain kind of rhythmic structure, then I maybe I'll, or any kind of structure, I'll devise little exercises for myself, kind of in the moment of, basically my practice philosophy is like, start playing and find something that doesn't feel good, and then just
And make it feel better.
yeah, make it feel
But
better.
actually, I'm very curious here. So you say, so you work, so some of the work, or most of the work, we could say all of the work, is in some way on time and timing, and even not in the pandemic times, but let's say also in the pandemic times. So you are alone. You are practicing without this rehearsal situation with other musicians. When you try to practice and get ready to feel comfortable in that eventual performance situation, do you sort of model, do you imagine, well, this is how Jack DeJohnette's timing feels, and or do you model, oh, I'm going to play this tune with Brad, and this is how the timing with him feels? Or so how do you model timing when you're alone, or do you just sort of try to make it feel good for just yourself, and then hope that this is then sort of fits into the context?
That's an excellent question. And I'll I don't know, because I haven't been doing it. I mean, I feel like
From your past memories.
yeah, from the past. Well, the thing is, I haven't, I mean, I'm emerging from a period of, I've never in my life, and actually, I was going to say never in my professional life, but actually, never in my life since I started playing music, played music so infrequently with other musicians. I mean, like I've done, less than 10 gigs, basically, maybe 10 since March of 2020. So, um, you cannot model playing with, there's no, there's no app there. There's no algorithm. Someone will create it. I mean, I work a bit
Oh,
at
of
stand.
course, when I say model, also this
Yeah,
is very
no, but no, this is great. Like, no, but you can't, like, I mean, I think, like, I do try to do that in a certain sense. Like, I mean, if it's somebody that, I mean, I actually, well, I haven't played with Jack for, oh, wow, 20 years or something like that. Maybe we did something at Charlie Hayden's memorial, but but I have some memory of that. So I can rely on that, on the memory of that, and try to kind of model that. I can go and listen to a lot of, if I, a lot of Jack DeJohnette, and then kind of conjure that. You mentioned Brad. I mean, that's somebody, Brad Meldau, somebody who I've had a, deep and ongoing musical relationship with basically since I moved to New York. So I feel like I can conjure that a little more easily. Not that I can do what he does, but I can conjure that feeling of that rhythmic, and it's not just rhythm. Just don't get me wrong. It's all, it's
much more complex.
Yeah. Right. I mean, this is the issue with what we do. It's the issue. It's the nature of human language, right? Like we have to, kind of codify things and create these labels for things, and put okay, well, there are all these different, just such varied and nuanced and different experiences and things in our musical world, but then we have to kind of slap some sort of general word to describe that, otherwise we can't have a conversation about
of course. I mean, I remember one of the sessions with my mentor Ferenc Radosu, where so it was getting so increasingly complicated with that explanation, this and so finally it was so overwhelming. I said, can you really think of all these things when you play?
Right.
I'm totally overwhelmed. He says, no, basically it's just an attempt to explain a biological and a physiological feeling, but language obviously both clarifies but also obscures so much of this. It's a very ineffective way of transferring knowledge, but it's more or less the only one we have. So it's actually, we are so in the thick of this, where there's a number of excellent questions that really fit into it, and some comments. Stuart Isaacoff, who has some very fascinating books among other things, comments, of course, jazz grew from dance, but for me the idea of swing or rhythmic groove comes down to the feeling that things are happening in the right way at the right time, regardless of particular style, whether music is bebop or Beethoven. And this I also very much agree with, that Beethoven grooves, and a lot of the time when it doesn't, it's a rather miserable musical experience, despite the fact that we know it's supposed to be so great. So it is not only for jazz. But Pamela Raponi says, hello, Joshua and Kirill. What do you think your strong points in improvisation are?
Can I take the other question?
You can take the other question. I just throw it out there. These are difficult.
No. I don't want to keep coming up. I mean, I feel like I haven't even answered. Like I was trying to. I never answered the question of like, what do I practice? But maybe we'll come back to that. Strong points in improvisation. Okay. Pregnant pause. If you change the strong to weak, we'd be the 2 hours, we'd be through those.
Well, I think let me rephrase it to help the possible congestion. What are some of your, let's say, ideals or aspirations in improvisation, or in judging improvisation? Let's say yours or somebody else's. What is a great improvised jazz solo for you?
Okay, so a great improvised jazz solo is one in which you feel and now I'm kind of taking the perspective of the listener, the listener as participant. Yeah, the one in which I feel the unquestionable, the inimitable uniqueness and individuality of the improviser in that moment, Yeah, like this is something that is being said and expressed that could only be expressed by this musician in this moment. It completely is like, and that's the kind of like out of thin air part, right? It's not out of thin air, but it belongs inextricably to like it's sui generis, it's generis, it's of of this time, of this human in this moment. So that's a, that sense of particularity and individuality and just plain specialness. Okay, so there's that. Then there's a sense that the sense of it having this feeling of completely being off the cuff in the moment, authentic to the moment, spontaneous, but also a sense of it having an unerring, organic narrative, organic logic, so that it's not just like, okay, this was played and that felt great and that was of the moment, but this moment comes from the moment before, leads to the moment that comes after, and the experience as it's happening, that you are being told. I mean, this is again very vague, but that I'm being told some sort of story. Yeah. So that sense of a narrative arc, and then this feeling of it being not, even though it could only have been played and only is being played by this individual in this moment, it also is completely in sync with and embracing of and integrated within everything else that's happening musically. Everything, all the so it's not just a solo, right? It's a constituent part of a collective improvised statement. And then I think also, ideally, that as individual as it is, and as personal as it is, and as much as you could only imagine this being said by these musicians in this moment, and it belongs to the moment and is fleeting and transitory in that sense, that there's also an individual in that sense, that there's also this kind of universality of it, this kind of there are some timeless truths there, so yeah, I mean, that's a high bar. That's a high bar.
Yeah, well, yes, it's high bar. That's worth aspiring to, and I think this is it's an overused word by now, but it's nevertheless a good one. This is what people, I think, call authenticity in some way. No, this is being authentic, and so one question again weaving from me and then leading to another question from one of our participants, but form in jazz. I asked this question, it's on my mind ever since I studied, and I asked this to Gary Burton, I asked this to Brad, but this sometimes I can't help and so get itchy when the form in a jazz piece, especially an ensemble piece, sort of, let's say, devolves into, well, there may be an intro or not, and everybody plays the tune, then this one plays a solo and it might be wonderful, and that one plays a solo, and so we go through that sequence, and then possibly we get the tune again and maybe a coda or not. And do you find that problematic, or Brad was quite defending it, that this is such a standardized vessel, but then there's so much possibility that can be contained within, or do you struggle with this question of that this is quite a likely stereotypical form?
Yeah, yeah. That's a fantastic question. So, you know, I certainly struggle with it. I certainly struggle with it. But it's also my happy place. It's also, it's also a comfort zone. I mean, I struggle with it in the same way that I might struggle, I mean, and that I was clearly struggling with, when we were talking about Coltrane initially in Alabama and how that's this, kind of, this great achievement of kind of, music being somehow simultaneously like completely authentic and pure, and the art is pure, but also being really having a message and being about something, that music not just being about music itself, and how that's, kind of looms large as this kind of like, yeah, for not unattainable, but hard to attain for many of us. And I struggle, in the sense that I struggle with like, wow, like I'm not creating music like that, and I should be creating like music like that. Uh, but it doesn't feel natural. I also struggle with this thing of like, yeah, like the fundamental, uh, you know, paradigm that we work under as jazz musicians is, like like basically, someone plays an intro, maybe, head, what we call head is the melody, right? The tune, and then solo, 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 trade with the drummer, head, coda if you're lucky, coda if you're lucky, if
Yeah.
you're lucky, if you're lucky. I mean, it's amazing. Like, we spend a lot of, I mean, I spend, time thinking about like, oh man, just wrote this tune and we don't have an ending. And then, sometimes I'll be like, I gotta come up with a good ending. And then like I go back and listen to like all of like, so many of my favorite jazz records, and the endings are amazing, but they're non-endings. It's just like they just stop, So look, that is our kind of like, that's our working model. That's our, I mean, I'm not an athlete, by any stretch of the imagination. I'm kind of a sports fan, or have been. But like, those are our kind of like basic rules of the game. That's our court that we play on most of the time. Yeah. And, is it basic? Is it kind of like, yes. Is it innovative? No, it's basically the way it's been done, And look, there are so many exceptions, to this rule. I mean, look, you brought up a composer like Brad. I mean, I think of, I mean, you think of like Duke Ellington or Jelly Roll Morton, or Wayne Shorter, or so many of our great composers in this music have escaped that, like, and consciously like said, I'm not going to just do that. But yet this is like, it is kind of our, it's kind of our model. And it kind of works. It works for us, and like if you're getting together with a bunch of musicians and playing a jam session, that's what you do, right? Unless someone brings in a tune with a very, very complicated form, and then everyone's trying to follow the form and read it, and okay, not. But like generally, that's kind of like, that's our fundamental. That's our script, and it's a very basic script. It's just an outline. I think what is defensible about that is that within those kind of general, that very basic playbook, that very basic, it's not a play, but that very basic kind of like, this is our little paradigm. This is our model, how things are going to go. Within that, there can seemingly be the space, the capacity, the room for endless creativity and discovery, and yes, perhaps innovation within that basic form. That's the experience on the inside. The question is, like, on the outside, for everybody who's there listening, and especially if you're not one of the people who's just like, playing the head and then waiting to take their solo, like, does that make you itchy? Does that make, like, okay, this is cool, but like, okay, do I really want to hear 10 tunes that follow just this format? So I think it's at once defensible and also problematic, and it is certainly something that I think about. And certainly I have, it's certainly something that I fall back on quite a bit in my composing and in my performance practice. If you go to any given gig of mine, chances are you're going to hear a lot of songs that basically follow that that game plan. But it's also something that I've definitely actively tried to not do. Like, I'll try to write a song that or a composition that isn't structured that way. And I think that, like, whether the form is predetermined like that, whether you're kind of following that, like, that kind of basic game plan or not, or whether you've constructed a very different game plan, where you a very different kind of a very different structure of how the song's going to unfold. Maybe you don't hear the melody to the end, something like that. But the magic can happen equally in both. Like, the magic is what happens between the musicians and among the musicians in those within the form. The magic, I think, a lot of times with jazz improvisation is not and the greatest inspiration, the greatest discovery, the greatest revelation is not within the form. It's the content within the form. And in particular, it's what happens between the musicians, among the musicians, and with the audience as these things are happening. So, like, yes, okay, we might be playing rhythm changes, very standard, based on George Gershwin's I Got Rhythm, the 32 bar form. I don't even know what it is. I have to count. Yeah, with a little tag, but no one plays the tag, right? So, like, when we might be playing that, or when we might be playing the blues, it's just like, okay, chorus after chorus after chorus, like, okay, and then someone else takes chorus after chorus after chorus. But with a group that is really attuned to each other, that's listening and interacting and conversing at all times, there's so much form, like, that's being created within the big form. Isn't even that interesting. It's this content, and the conversational content creates these little forms within that's like, and that's the magic. And that, like, you could sit there and try to map that out and score it all, and you wouldn't be able to come close, and so the experience that I've had playing with, maybe this is why I tend to gravitate towards smaller group configurations, typically like quintet, usually like quartet, trio, duo. I've done a lot of duo with Brad, like the fewer kind of lines of communication that you have in the band, the more kind of the thicker, the more bandwidth you have within each of those lines. And that's what, it's not, oh, we're in bar, we're on the bridge of I Got Rhythm. So what? It's D7. So what? But it's like, what did, wait, someone just played an E flat over D7. Wow, like all of a sudden, like now this is something else. Yeah. So it's simultaneously defensible and problematic. But
No, but this is a great answer, and I think that also pointing out that the real innovation in this particular art style is perhaps not in a large scale form is this fascinating. It's a roll. We can roll in two questions. One, and you're partially answering them already. But Kim Bayonko, I'm not sure if I pronounced the name wrong. I apologize. Kim asks, "Can you talk more about your composition process?" And in addition, there's a question from or question and comment from Hang Hemsoth, who says, "Deconstructing form is something contemporary jazz composers work with, adding influences of non-jazz content and also constructing open sections, different blowing changes are these ideas you work with. Open sections are very interesting because the collective makes decisions as to length, and a simple visual cue can signal change. Do you agree?" And you've talked about these, but I wanted to pass them on as well. And
yes, yeah. I mean, just to be brief, I promise. I absolutely agree with that, and I don't mean to suggest that that this isn't being done in jazz. It absolutely is being done in jazz. I think, and particularly tends to be done. I mean, I think composers who are writing for larger ensembles are really doing amazing work with that. And it's something that I try to do as well. In even in my smaller improvisation, smaller groups. It's certainly something. Yeah, it's not. I don't want every concert I play to just be like, every tune is head solo solo head. That's not that gets boring, unless you're playing duo with Brad Meldau, then it's not boring.
I wanted to ask you, so speaking about the composition process versus the improvising, if you agree or what your response is to, I think one way to think about the evolution of classical music that also I think has evolved from the spirit of improvisation, and practically all great composers have been improvisers, sometimes great improvisers, but at least certainly improvisers, and it's could be seen that as the ambitions grew more, the desire to preserve one's art grew, the number of players that potentially would be involved grew. The natural vessel was to write down things, to compose things, and thus it became more or less written down music. Do you think jazz, I mean, and it seems that to a certain extent jazz is following that trajectory as well, but jazz came into being at a time when the recording as a medium of preservation also came more and more into force. And do you think that has altered the trajectory of jazz development and helped it stay more of an improvised art? Or do you think this is not a factor?
Yeah. The fact that, yeah,
that in a sense Coltrane did not need to, write down every note of his solo to, to have it project into the future or into eternity, but certainly, certainly Bach did, or certainly Beethoven did.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I think that, yeah, the easy answer is yes, but I never seem to take the easy answer. I'm not sure. Even for someone as gargantuan. I mean, there's no greater innovative force in this music than someone like Coltrane or someone like Charlie Parker or Thelonious Monk or Miles Davis or Duke Ellington. But even for someone like Coltrane, who was certainly aware of his, profound. I mean, he was changing the rules of the game as with each note that he played. He was certainly aware of at a certain point of, how much he meant to this music and how much he was just kind of, shattering existing conventions and creating his new language. I wonder how, what that consciousness of like, how important was it to him that I am trying to create something that I'm trying to project into the future? Like, I get the sense with, and maybe this is me projecting my own, my own kind of like what's valuable to me about being a jazz musician onto these, onto my idols, which I have no business doing, right? But like maybe it's not so much about like with jazz, it's not so much about like I'm creating this now that will be some sort of that will have this relevance and longevity and influence in the future, that I'm creating this work of music now that's going to, that's going to change the world, or that's gonna have this influence. I kind of feel like it's more about like this the urgency of that, what it means to just create in the moment, to improvise in the moment, and that connection and the bond that's created there. I kind of feel like that's, I mean, I know that that's ultimately, not that I don't want to, I mean, if if I'm remembered, somewhat kindly by history, great, but like, I'd rather be, not be considered notorious in terms of the art, right? But I kind of feel like I wonder if that was even an issue for musicians like Coltrane and even, jazz musicians. I mean, there's some legendary mythical jazz musicians. I mean, I think a lot of people talk about Buddy Bolden, one supposedly the first great jazz cornetist, and maybe one of the first great jazz improvisers. I mean, Louis Armstrong is heralded as the first great jazz soloist, and for good reason. But people talk about Buddy Bolden. There's no record of his. I believe there's no recording of his. So like I wonder, like, there is an aspect, and it may have something to do with the source of this music, the jazz music, as being born out of a particular community or a set of communities, and their experiences and their struggles and their affirmations in the face of the adversities that they faced. And I'm talking particularly about the Black Americans in this country. I mean, they are the foundational sources for this music. This is a music that comes out of the Black American experience. It's a music that now is truly a global art form, but the practices, the language, all of it, it has its roots in that experience. I wonder to what extent this notion of like projecting into the future was really the relevant issue. Maybe, I feel like it's the music was just a part of the being. It was a part of the living your life now, in this day, in this time. And I think that sort of experience, I mean, that is more of a orally based orientation, or orally based tradition. I'm scared of this word tradition, especially with a capital T, but it's and when I say oral, I mean oral like spoken, like the languages, but oral also like the information, the musical information and content is created through the speaking, through the playing, and through the listening, through the oral, and I think that's the source of how this language has developed and been passed down. Now, of course, there's the amount, the resources, the text-based resources in jazz and in jazz education have just exploded, and not only that, now it's not just like the text, but it's like you go online and you've got these listicles of like, top 13 ways to like navigate giant steps changes, and like, how to sit on the drums and play like Elvin, like there's hacks galore, right? There are hacks galore, and I should probably check some of them out. I probably make my life a lot easier, and maybe in my secret life I do check some of those out, right? But and those are, I'm not at all, I mean, I sound like the typical, like just middle-aged curmudgeon, but I'm not that. I think that they're like, I know that there are kids out there who are playing their butts off that learned, I mean, literally playing, like they're playing great. And they learned from the internet. They learned from the text. They learned from reading and getting the PDFs and like following the little hacks and everything. And they're playing great. Okay, so there's nothing. I think it's an invaluable resource. But okay, the textual history of jazz, like the manuscript history of jazz, is riddled with problems. I mean, like the first, I mean, you probably know the real book, right? Like the fake book. So the real book, it was like for a long time that was like what jazz musicians had to like learn tunes. And like I think apparently it's like I don't know what edition it is now, but it's probably a lot better now. But like back when I was in college in the late 80s, it was notoriously just freaking wrong, like on some basic
But it had its
stuff.
charm, the fact
Yeah,
that
it had its charm, right?
cobbled together a resource.
Yeah, yes, and at least it wasn't. And I say this as someone who, like, I haven't written a tune by hand probably for 5 years. As someone who relies way too heavily on music notation, at least it's not just like a Sibelius or Finale printout. Yeah, But I think the idea was like this was the text, and everybody knew, or everyone who was listening to the music and like playing with other musicians, everyone knew that this text was BS, right? But it was still there, and you could kind of refer to it, but it was just kind of like there. It wasn't like it wasn't like getting it wasn't like getting Beethoven's ninths, and these are the notes, and these are the I mean.
Well, wait till you start getting the urtext of the real book.
Okay, right? Yeah, I'm out of my league now, right?
Calcification of the thing. And I guess to be fair, then I think the time of Bach and Mozart, music was much more of this immediate thing. One could say that possibly it is Beethoven firmly being the first one, possibly realizing, so this is my relationship to the future, and this is what I'm projecting to the future, and this is my relationship to the past. And after that, the weight of history, obviously, the Brahms saying, how can I write a symphony after Beethoven, and sort of just the brilliant sediment of everything that's accumulated, I think, has been pressing on people and making them also so hyper aware of past and future.
Right. I mean, I think that I mean, I don't mean to say that is not something that we should be thinking about. I'm not saying we shouldn't be thinking about that. I mean, look, we cannot help but think about this. I mean, we live in a time when, like, I mean, just like, I mean, it's, you know, how can you not be self-conscious with all the media out here, just like, you know, reflect, and, you know, people are now trying to figure out how to, like, you know, how to create, like, construct their identity, you know, it's like, it's crazy. So like, there's nothing there's nothing wrong. There's something certainly valuable about thinking about, like, how do I fit in with all this history as a jazz musician, you know, and am I doing anything that is, you know, am I doing something that is worthwhile and creative and and ultimately maybe influential and innovative? Am I saying something new? And, you know, but I think that, like, it can be overwhelming, because there's so much that has been done, and so much, you know, there's so many little tributaries and branches that you can follow, and, you know, little rabbit holes in the language that you can go down, and they're all valuable, and you should do them if you're called to do that. But I think that, like, all I'm saying is that all of that stuff can and should be taken into account and thought about, and can even form the basis for a creative, you know, your creative, I mean, this isn't the Politburo, you know, creative 5-year plan, right? And, you know, this is what I want to be in 5 years. Okay, but that there are also things that can take you out of the musical moment. And yep. And that is the danger, especially with jazz, because you don't have anything, in my opinion, if you're not fully in that moment, in yourself, in your sound, with others, in their sound, and so you have to lose all of that. I feel, at least I do, I have to lose all of that in that moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And speaking about so self-conscious feeling, the media, etc., relationship to recordings, and especially so jazz recordings, and especially so there is this temptation with the wonderful technology that we have nowadays, truly mind-blowing in the recording studio. Of course, one could edit and tweak, and I know some of your jazz colleagues who, you know, have their solo transcribed, and then they don't like this note, and then they, you know, replay it or paste it in or whatever. So and at the same time, that seems rather contrary to the spirit of improvised in the moment art. What's your feeling? What's your relationship with making recordings? And is it for you a sort of just a photograph, capture that moment? Or do you find that, okay, when I'm making a recording, this is just a different genre of music making, and then you sort of switch into that different gear? This was also, by the way, more or less a question from Adrian Colborn, who said, you know, would this be different when creating a studio recording?
Yeah. It's absolutely different. It's absolutely different. I don't want or expect a studio jazz recording to sound like a live concert. I mean, that's a futile endeavor. That's you're doomed from the start, you know, because it's not. You want a live. You know, you want a jazz recording to sound like a live performance. Record a live performance, you know, and then it's still not going to be the same. You know, it's like
you have done live recordings. No, there are.
Yeah. I have, but I guess I guess all I'm saying is, and some of my favorite jazz recordings of all time are live. But my favorite are probably may not be live. They're studio recordings. I think that with I believe that the studio is its own environment, and you have to embrace, you have to situate yourself in that environment and embrace that environment, and not try to make it something other than what it is. And what you don't have in the studio is you don't have that kind of complete the circle isn't complete. You don't have that complete feedback loop, that magical connection that you're going to have with an audience in the room on a stage. You're just not going to have that. But what you do have is an intimacy among the musicians, and a kind of a capacity, the ability to really hear and focus and concentrate on the detail, of what's going on, texturally, sonically, all these things. There's a kind of clarity and focus and detail, that orientation that can exist in the studio, that's really magical. And yeah, I do believe that, like, there's nothing wrong with using the studio to its utmost advantage. Like, I don't personally have like any sort of, like, I don't feel like there's like any absolutist kind of moral prohibition against, like, like you can only put on a record what happened live in the moment. Like, can you fix something? Sure, go ahead and fix it. Like, I've fixed things before. It's like where do you draw the line? Like, I've certainly, like, these days it's easy to fix. You take a take of a tune, and, like, the bass player, oh no, not the bass player, the saxophone player messes up, the note in the third bar. And am I gonna, like, this is a perfect take? Are we going to do another take or do a whole band insert just so I can fix that note? No, if I'm isolated, I'll go in and fix the note. 100% cool with that. It's a great take, and it's a great, it's a decent saxophone solo, except for this one bar phrase. Do I want to fix that? There now we're getting into slipperier territory. Have I done it? Absolutely. Do I regret it? I don't. Well, half the time I do, half the time I don't. But, like, so, it's not this kind of like it's not ethics for me, but I think you have to be aware that every time you are doing that, you are potentially you're gaining something in kind of like in accuracy on a certain level, or in clarity and in cleanliness, but you're potentially taking something away in that the whatever that live flow synergy is. And you can take things away and it'll be fine, but sometimes it can be, I think, I've learned this, you can, I've been close to the precipice and then backed off, and I've been around other musicians where I felt like, well, maybe they fell over the precipice. It can be like a death by 1,000 little cuts.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's true with editing in classical music, and I find this for a long time. I think now less, but there was at a certain point there was this fashion to point out, Glenn Gould's studio recording of the Goldberg Variations, the last one, the 1981, that this was so that there's 650 splices or something. First of all, by modern standards,
that's not that much, right?
It's not that much. Of course, thinking that they actually did it splicing and putting tape together is amazing. But I think the real retort to that is, you make it sound good after 650 splices. So this is also not good. And he had to have played everything. And these are certainly aesthetic choices. It's not because he couldn't play the notes. We have his live recordings of the Goldberg Variations just as well. So in that sense, it's playing together with that different art form and making aesthetic choices. But one can fall over the precipice, and sometimes, we've all experienced it.
We've all at least peered you know, we peered into the abyss.
And we peer into the abyss all the time. I know that I have to let you go because you have also another thing coming up. But perhaps one question that's been on my mind, also itching to ask you, and there's so many questions to ask you, and we have even more questions still from our participants because, well, you are very interesting to talk to. But in your bio, so quite quickly it says actually, so that you went to Harvard, you have a strong education in humanities, and I find it very attractive and appealing that you said, for a long time you didn't even consider yourself a musician or making it your profession. And so I would love to hear, so how important having this education in the humanities versus perhaps more professionalized, specific to music sort of educational pipeline that you also could have had, or an aspiring musician can choose. I find it very appealing that you have this rooting in humanities, but do you find that's an important component for you?
I find it's an important component of who I am, and so therefore it's an important component of my music. Yes. Is there a direct correlation? Did reading, on the grounding of the metaphysics of morals or whatever that I remember that was one of those books that, like, back then we used to use these yellow highlighters, and I remember I went back after I read it and the entire text was yellow highlighted. Like,
rather concentrated matter.
Yeah. So yeah, and each sentence is like 2 pages or whatever, the German language. But did it make me swing harder? Absolutely not. But like, yeah, I mean, look, okay, the easy answer is, had I known now what I know then, which is that I would end up being a professional musician, I would have and should have gone to music school. I wouldn't have been playing catch up and continuing to be playing catch up to all my peers. Okay, that's what I should have done. But do I have any regrets? Absolutely not. I had a great education. I wasn't happy, but I had a great education. There are still, I forgot 99.9999% of the things that I learned, but there are still, if not actual kind of like digestible, if not actual facts or theories that I can refer to, there are frameworks, critical frameworks, for looking at the world, or maybe frameworks for how to construct your own critical frameworks. We want to get meta about it. Like those, I think they're with me still. It's both a blessing and a curse. But overall, I'm glad that I have them. I'd like to think that it keeps me. It certainly keeps me questioning, which again has its weaknesses as well as its strengths. But I think in this world today, we have to keep questioning. We have to remain critical. There's so much out there that needs, there's so, just look, there's so much information out there that's just plain false, and that's always been the case. But the seductiveness of false information and the kind of the rising preeminence, terrifying rising preeminence of spectacle over truth and image over fact is chilling. And I think that, like, we have to have these frameworks to as human beings in this world. I can't say that like it's helped me do more good in the world, but yeah, but it's helped me it's helped me kind of understand the world and also form opinions and form feelings, and those help me as a musician. That ultimately, even though I don't make music about anything in particular, my at my when it's going right, my music is never it's never just about the music, and it's certainly never just about the notes.
Well, it's a brilliant answer, and I think we're returning to what we said at the start of our big improvised chat, that there isn't necessarily an easily directly definable link to it's good because it gets you to do that, but yet undeniably it does something, and there are numerous imperceptible and perceptible impacts. I mean, this is what I feel when people ask, "Oh, having played jazz, does it, how does it affect your playing Beethoven?" Well, it certainly does, but I
Right.
absolutely can't really describe in any sensible way
Right.
why or how
Right.
that experience influences this. So I think it's in some way just a call for all of us to keep exposing ourselves to experiences and information and knowledge, not fake information, but real information, real substance, and real knowledge, because that does make our neural network that much more enriched and that much more interlinked, and then you get incredible solos such as ones that you play, or Coltrane, and you get amazing compositions and books. I'm so thankful that you agreed to join us, and we went on this journey together. I certainly learned a lot, and I hope that it's to be continued also live in
Yeah,
person.
I'm sorry I never played, but it's
Yeah, I think
the only opportunity would have been like, well, how do you practice? And I was like,
I was so
practice,
tempted.
so.
I was so tempted to ask you, and I was like, oh, do you feel like playing something for us? But then I remember all the times that somebody asked me, in some context, oh, do you feel like playing something for us? I think we come and we hear you. Round two, and we come and all hear you at a theater near us, and experience that. I certainly look forward to hearing you live soon, and continuing this conversation also in person. But I really want to thank you, and thank all of our participants, and
Thank
for the
you, everyone.
questions, and for the attention, and for the sense of community that I think is possible to feel even in this virtual space. So I look forward to more with all of us together. And thank you, Joshua.
Thank you, Kirill. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Okay, be well.